an opening day starter in Jeremy Hellickson. I saw him throw 5 hitless innings on Sunday against the Astros down there. And, I talked about yesterday, I'm wondering if the Phillies is Hellickson a guy that they're hoping, he pitches opening day. Are they trying to raise his stock to trade him, or is he a guy that they think in a year or two when the younger guys, are a little bit more prime, that Hellickson becomes that veteran at the back end of the rotation?
Well, I think Hellickson kind of serves both purposes in a way this year. I think they want him to come in and start the season, stabilize the starting rotation that was, let's face it, an absolute nightmare last year. So create some stability early on. And then hopefully by July, some of their prospect pitchers like Jake Thompson are ready. And then they can move Hellickson to a contender. So starting in opening day, I think, is a good idea. It sort of raises his value because he's out there as the Phillies' opening day starter. And so hopefully we won't have to see what we had last year, which was the never-ending carousel of the Sean O'Sullivans and Kevin Correas that, I could go on for an hour with the
Severino Gonzalez.
Exactly.
I think those guys are sitting at Chickies and Pete's with us today. Hey, Sean O'Sullivan, how are you, bud?
Right, Severino. I remember that start vividly.
Speaking of, by the way, real fast on sitting in a bar and seeing somebody, I was at this Surfside Tavern in Florida the other day, and Sean Casey from the MLB Network was in there.
Oh, nice.
And my man was belting tunes out.
Oh, yeah?
Belting.
Like the PT? He was singing
I was like, this guy's great. Out there in full force.
Don't be afraid, Listen, Frank Klose is with us, by the way. Hey, Frank, so I guess they said Aaron Nola will be the starter then for the home opener in Philadelphia a week later. I saw Aaron Nola last year in San Diego, and I think that was one of his first starts or one of his first quality starts, I know, for the Phillies. Just your thoughts on Aaron Nola and how he's looked this spring and the fact that they didn't name him the starter, but he's starter material.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into him not being named the opening day starter. I don't really see that as a slight in the least. I know he gets a lot of the hype, but I think he projects not necessarily to be an ace type pitcher necessarily, but a very strong starter towards the front of the starting rotation. So I think putting him second, it takes a little bit of pressure off him. I mean, he's only 22 years old. You want to still have some sort of carrot at the end of the stick for him to work towards. But he had a few lumps this spring, but he's looking better. And I think part of the reason is he came into spring training pretty assured of a spot in the starting rotation. So when you have that, you can work on some pitches. You don't have to worry about getting every hitter out necessarily. If you want to work on your curveball, you work on your curveball. So I think Nola's getting some of that. But as we get closer to the beginning of the season, he's looking sharper and sharper. And, I expect to have a decent season out of Nola this year. The best that he can with the bullpen he has and the lineup he has.
Hey, on Nola, we got a lot of young arms to watch. I know Hellickson and Morton are kind of the elder statesmen of this rotation. But Jared Eichhoff was hurt, but he pitched well at the end of last year. I thought he threw well the other day. Is he a guy that you think that the Phillies – that he has exceeded the expectations of what the Phillies thought they were getting when they got him back in that deal for Cole?
I think he's quickly becoming what they thought they would get on the upside. I think they were looking for somebody that could be a 3-4 type starter that does a decent job. That's not going to blow you out of the water. But looking at his start the other day, I mean, he had 7 strikeouts. I mean, that's pretty impressive, even if it's a short outing and, he gave up a few runs. So I think he looks pretty good. I think he's somebody that's going to create that stability that I mentioned a minute ago that the Phillies badly need. And so when they got him in return for Hamels, I think what they wanted from him was somebody that they could use right away that was pretty much major league ready, that they could tolerate some of his rookie lumps that the Rangers were not in a position to do. And that's what they needed. If they were going to trade a starter like Hamels, they needed somebody to step right in and start right away. And I think that he satisfied that for the Phillies, and he was right on the cusp of the majors, and I think we're going to see a nice, solid pitcher out of him in the middle of the rotation.
All right, Frank Klose is with us, 97.3 ESPN.com, part of SportsTalkPhilly.com. Frank, let me ask you then where we are today, which is, what are we at, the 24th of March, so about 10 days to the opener here. What battles and positions are still up for grabs?
Well, thanks to the injuries in the outfield, the Phillies have to figure out what they're going to do for their reserve outfielders or perhaps even platoon roles. So you have David Lowe and you have Cedric Hunter battling for that last left-handed outfielder spot. And they're both playing pretty well. Cedric Hunter gives you a little bit more power perhaps, but David Lowe, he has more major league experience at this point. Cedric just had a small cup of coffee in the major leagues with the Padres a whole 5 years ago. So that will be interesting to see which one of those two that they take. Question could be, does Darnell Sweeney get a look in the major leagues? The Phillies might opt to take both Lowe and Hunter if they feel that they can option Darnell Sweeney to the minor leagues. He's not hitting a whole lot this spring. He's made a couple errors, but so the question will be, do they want to keep developing Sweeney in the minor leagues, or can they use him in the major leagues right now? I think what's going to be hard for the Phillies as we look at final position battles is where they're going to get the 40-man roster spot. So they have a lot of invitees to spring training, and they're going to have to find the space for some of them if they're going to bring them in. Now, they have a couple candidates to be outrighted off the major league roster, such as Severino Gonzalez and David Buchanan. You can send Matt Harrison to the 60-day disabled list. You could probably send Aaron Altair to the 60-day disabled list, but you're gonna get a little bit crunched in terms of how many 40-man roster spots you're going to have, and that could end up dictating some of the decisions. That could mean that they don't promote a Hunter or Lowe, and they just tend to go with Sweeney and consider Darren Ruff extra outfield insurance just because they need to keep them on the 40-man roster. Now, the fifth starter spot is the one main battle that we're looking at. Certainly, Adam Morgan has had a very good spring. You could argue that he's worthy of the fifth spot in the starting rotation after he pitched very admirably last season. But Vince Velasquez is the future, hopefully, front end of the rotation type starter that the Phillies will have. I personally would have put him in the bullpen and tried to groom him as a closer, but they're going to go with him as a starter.
I said the same thing yesterday, Frank. I agree with you that Velasquez, to me, looks like he's got more closer stuff, and they've been talking about going with possibly a six-man rotation.
The six-man rotation, it's just not going to work on this roster, in my opinion. You would have to make some other moves to make that happen, because when you break it down, if you go with a sixth starter, that means you need to be one fewer on the bench, or you need to be one fewer in the bullpen. I don't think one fewer in the bullpen is a good idea, because you still have some young starters, and they're going to have to eat those innings in the back end of games. I mean, so let's say, like I mentioned a minute ago, someone like Eichhoff or Nola, or one of the young starters like Velasquez, they're going to have some growing pains along the way. So if they get knocked around one day and then all of a sudden the bullpen has to come in and pitch 6 innings, then you're not in a good spot. Now, if you say, we're going to go with one less position player, I mean, the Phillies are essentially taking up 2 roster spots for first base right now. So if you have Ruff and you have Howard, and they're basically 2 players for one position, your roster spots are really at a premium. So I just don't see how a 6-man rotation is going to work.
It's a good point. Frank Klose with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM. How about Odubel Herrera? Injury situation.
The mystery finger.
Yeah, will he be ready in time, Frank?
They seem to indicate that he will, but we're not necessarily seeing any progress either. So that's something definitely to watch. I mean, we still have over a week. Supposedly he just has inflammation. They did the X-ray. There was no break, no sprain as far as they can tell. Hopefully there's not a sprain. But if it's just inflammation, it's probably one of those things that they don't want to agitate while in gameplay. And the workouts, I'm sure. He can still run and he can still do some other things, but I don't think you want to risk agitating it anymore. So we probably won't see him until he feels totally comfortable, just because these spring games don't necessarily matter a whole lot. And let's remember too, if you're trying to figure out who David Lowe or Cedric Hunter can make this team, then you want to give them a look. And even today, Manny Burris, who was brought in as a utility player as non-roster invitee, the Phillies are going to put him in center field today. So You know, Phillies have 3 night games in a row, by the way. That's very
weird schedule. Yeah,
and I know, talking to some of the Phillies front office guys, they do not like that down there.
No,
they want to get to bed and have a couple of grouper sandwiches.
That's right. So anyway, Samani Burris is going to play center field tonight. So they might be considering him for a roster spot. That's possible. But at least if in Odubel's absence, they're able to try a few things and see if what they're going to do for these final roster spots.
Frank, how about a guy that a lot of people, or at least the locals, are trying to track and see if he'll make the team and what his role is going to be? Andrew Bailey. What do you know about him?
Well, Bailey looked pretty good the first few outings. He did get knocked around and took the loss on Tuesday. So I think he still has a good shot to stick with the team. I think they're less worried about how many runs you're giving up, but what his velocity is like and what his movement on his pitches is like. So far, I think he looks pretty good. There's going to be a lot that gets worked out in the next 10 days that we have left. I'm sure they're going to give him every opportunity to pitch, maybe give him a chance to pitch back-to-back days and see how well he's faring and kind of go from there. The nice thing is, and it's not necessarily the nicest thing for him, but the nice thing is he is on a minor league deal, and they could always stash him in the minors and have him in mind for later. But a lot of that will depend on how things are going this last week. I mean, they have a couple of non-roster invitees that are looking pretty good, like Bobby Loff, who's been pretty
I had some problems with him yesterday, too.
I liked how you said that.
yeah, it's hard to
Loff Ambrosia.
Is that how it's supposed to be? I know many different ways at this time, but
he closed the game. He closed the game on Sunday. Was there, and it was funny because my dad and I were like, "All right, who are they going to give this opportunity to? Is it going to be Bailey, Hernandez, or Edward Mujica?" And here's Bobby Ambrosia. Now, I'm just quoting Chris Wheeler. I don't know that Wheels was saying it right or wrong, but I have a hard time thinking that Wheels was messing the name up, knowing the way he likes to pronunciate things.
Well, the media guy lists him as La From Boyce, B-O-Y-C-E, but I've heard a lot of different things. A lot of people nickname him Strawberry because that's actually what his name means. So.
Gotcha. All right. Frank. Yeah, no, I was impressed with him too. And, hey, we'll be keeping our eye on the Phillies with Frank Klose throughout the baseball season. Go to at Frank Klose 973. That's Klose with a K on Twitter. Make sure you check out Sports Talk Philly, Philadelphia there for all their Phillies coverage. And you can read all of Frank's stuff at 97.3 ESPN.com. We'll have him on every Tuesday and Thursday right at this time throughout the Phillies baseball season. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, guys.